morning. Today I'm going to be reviewing the Vostok Amphibia 090659. This watch is available on ebay.co.uk for £60 from Zenitar. I've used Zenitar a number of times over the years to purchase my Vostok Amphibias with no problems. He has over 30,000 transactions and positive feedback of 100%. So I highly recommend you use Zenitar if you're interested in purchasing a Vostok Amphibia. So with regards to Vostok, they've been producing watches in Chistopol in Russia since 1967. Vostok in Russian means east, and on the dial you can see it says Amphibia in Russian Cyrillic. So firstly, let's look at the box that the Amphibia comes in, and then I'll talk you through the other items one gets with the piece. So the Amphibia comes in this basic plastic watch box which has Vostok embossed on the lid, and although basic, I think it is acceptable, bearing in mind that this is a low tier price point piece. It's only £60. Inside the watch box, the watch sits on this piece of plastic, and I think it's acceptable because it does suffice in protecting the watch in shipping from any damage. Now, with regards to the other items one gets with the piece, the watch also comes with this booklet which details the authorised dealers of Vostok in Russia. So it details every single Russian authorised dealer, continues on the back page, but unfortunately it's only printed in Russian Cyrillic, so unless you can read Russian Cyrillic it's of no use to you, and really it's only going to be useful if you are a resident of Russia and you want to return the piece to an authorised dealer for service. So the other thing one gets with the watch is an owner's instruction manual, and as you can see it also says Amphibia in Russian Cyrillic. This details the operation of the caliber 2415 movement, which is an automatic movement used in the piece. And again, the instruction manual is entirely in Russian Cyrillic, although it does have a diagram detailing the crown setting positions, so one can learn how to set the time. And on the back page, it also has a space for the authorised dealer to stamp and date the owner's instruction manual with a date of purchase. Zenitar doesn't do that, but I want to give him credit because he does also include an English translated printout of the owner's instruction manual. So if you can't read Russian Cyrillic, you can read Zenitar's English translation, which does detail how to operate the caliber 2415 automatic movement. So with regards to the watch itself, firstly I want to talk a little bit about the brand. Vostok means east in Russian, and Vostok are based in Chistopol. They've been making the Amphibia since 1967. Originally the Amphibia was designed as a military issued piece for Soviet naval divers, and they used the Amphibia from 1967, its inception, through till the 1980s. The watch then became available to civilians for purchase, not just military personnel, Soviet naval divers. So it became a popular watch both for military naval divers and also civilians alike. Now, Vostok still continued to make the Amphibia. This is the latest version made to their latest specification, but it does carry many of the original design features of that early 1967 piece. This is my personal favourite because it does have the original 12, 9, 6 and 3 large Arabic numeral 1967 dial layout of that very first 1967 version. The original tonneau case was very similar to this 090 series case. The only notable difference is that although it was the same 40mm diameter, early versions of the Amphibia used an 18mm lug width, which would be considered to be small by today's standards. 20 and 22mm are now the standard sizes for 40mm cases. So this has a 22mm lug width rather than the earlier 18mm, and I think that lug width balances the bracelet better with the head of the piece. So with regards to the specification of the Amphibia, 40mm diameter, it has a 48mm lug-to-lug measurement and a 22mm lug width, as I've discussed. Perfect proportions for a 40mm case. As you'll know from previous reviews, I consider 48mm to be the sweet spot, the perfect optimum lug-to-lug measurement for all wrist sizes. So regardless of whether you have a 6 to 7 inch wrist or a 7 to 8 inch wrist, a 48mm lug-to-lug measurement will fit you very well. Now, this watch features a unique design characteristic of the Amphibia. The crystal is 3mm thick and it's made from a material called lucite. Lucite is a type of acrylic, and one of the properties of lucite is that it deforms plastically under atmospheric pressure. So the greater the atmospheric pressure exerted on the lucite, the more it plastically deforms, and therefore the greater the effective hermetic seal between the crystal and the case itself. So very clever design, because usually dive watches work on the principle of sealing the crystal, which is usually made from mineral crystal or sapphire crystal. They seal the crystal to the case using a gasket or rubber O-ring. But with regards to the Amphibia, it uses a different design. The crystal itself effectively becomes the hermetic seal to the case. There's no need for a rubber O-ring or gasket because the lucite plastically deforms like a rubber gasket would do. So very clever design, and although it's 3mm thick, it really does add to the aesthetic pleasing look of the piece, because one gets a characteristic distortion and also slight magnification effect due to the thickness of that lucite dome crystal. Now, the negative of using lucite, like acrylic and plexiglass, is that it's softer than mineral crystal and therefore not as scratch resistant. It's very soft and it's prone to showing scuffs and scratches, but however, one can easily polish out scuffs and scratches to the crystal using Polywatch, which is available on Amazon and eBay. It's inexpensive. So 3mm thick crystal. The watch is 14.8mm thick, and it weighs 138 grams on this stainless steel bracelet. Now, I will divide this watch into two sections, the head of the piece and the bracelet. Really, when one buys a Vostok Amphibia, such as this 090659 we're looking at, one buys it for the head of the piece. I would describe the stainless steel bracelet as poor quality. It's throwaway quality. The links are folded, hollow links, and also the end links are hollow rather than being solid. Also, the clasp is a flip lock, but it's made from a very lightweight gauge of metal, and it's very poor quality. Pressed metal clasp rather than being solid stainless steel milled, and as you can see, it really is very poor quality. So I would say to you, when you buy a Vostok Amphibia, factor into the cost of purchase of buying either a NATO strap, rubber strap or leather strap to put the watch on, alternatively a stainless steel bracelet, because really one would want to throw away this abhorrent folded metal press clasp bracelet. But however, it is finished to an acceptable standard with mirror polished centre links and brushed satin finish outer links, as well as brushed satin finish to the flanks and also the underside. So, tonneau case, and it also has a solid stainless steel bezel. Now, another feature of this piece is that it has a bi-directional bezel, which doesn't click. And the reason for that is the original Amphibia, as I've discussed, was made in 1967, and that predated the use of 60-click and 120-click unidirectional bezels. In the 1960s, dive pieces often had bi-directional bezels, and it works with an octagonal copper wire underneath the bezel, and that secures the bezel to the case. It clicks onto it, so one can rotate it bi-directionally without any clicks. So it does suffice in securing the bezel to the case, but it does take some getting used to if you're used to 60-click or 120-click unidirectional bezels, which are now the contemporary standard. The solid stainless steel bezel is finished to a high standard, polished to a flawless mirror finish. It has grooves recessed for the Arabic numerals and minute ticks. The first 15 minutes are indexed in red, as you can see, and the remaining 45 minutes are indexed in black. So very aesthetically pleasing, and it does complement the flawless mirror polishing to the top side of the tonneau case, the flanks, and also the underside. Now, the underside of the case is a screw down solid stainless steel case back. As you can see, brushed satin finish. It's engraved to a high standard in Russian Cyrillic with the specification of the piece, and it details that it is 200 meters water resistance. So the case is secure. The case back is secure to the case by a rotating stainless steel ring. The solid stainless steel case back remains in situ with two slots, one at 12, one at 6 o'clock, and the stainless steel ring rotates around the case back, which provides a very effective hermetic seal to 200 meters. There's a large flat rubber gasket beneath the case back, and that really does provide a very good hermetic seal. Now, another unique characteristic is the coin edge finish crown. It's unsigned, as you can see, but it is finished to a very high standard. Now, on early versions of the Amphibia, the crown was made from brass, which was solid, and then the brass was nickel plated to make it look silver. The problem with that nickel plated brass was, with regular use, the plating would wear off the crown and therefore expose the golden coloured brass underneath, so it didn't look very aesthetically pleasing. So the use of a solid stainless steel crown is a notable upgrade on the original brass screw down crown, and I want to show you a unique characteristic of it. If one unscrews the crown, it wobbles on the crown stem. Now I want to point out this isn't a defect, it's actually a design characteristic which is unique to the Amphibia. It's designed to wobble. Now the reason for that is inside the screw down crown is a clutch mechanism. The purpose of the clutch mechanism is to disengage the crown from the winding stem, and therefore that isolates shocks from the crown which would otherwise be transmitted down the crown stem to the centre of the movement and therefore damage the movement. Bearing in mind that this is a tonneau case and it predates the use of crown guards to protect the crown, and therefore the clutch mechanism inside the crown was necessary to protect the movement from shock damage. So it's a unique design. I've never seen it on another watch, the wobbling crown on the crown stem and the clutch mechanism within it. The crown threading onto the crown tube is silky smooth. It's no resistance whatsoever, so it's an absolute pleasure to unscrew the crown and screw it back in again. And there's a rubber O-ring inside the crown tube which provides an effective hermetic seal to 200 meters. Very clever design, and it does work in protecting the movement from damage from shocks, as I've discussed. Now, with regards to the execution of the watch, flawless finishing to the bezel, the case, and also the screw down exhibition case back. I would describe the bracelet as well finished but poor quality because it uses folded links, as I've discussed, which are then sintered. You can see the edges of them are sintered with solder to fill in the folded links. So really it's a shame about the bracelet. It also pulls arm hairs, but I'll give you a wrist shot and you can see how it fits on my 8-inch wrist, and then I'll talk you through the movement specification. Now, I haven't sized this bracelet, I've simply taken it out of the watch box and put it on my wrist. Good positive click to the clasp despite the flip block being a light gauge of metal. Good secondary positive click to the flip block. And the clasp is signed with a B for Vostok. Vostok is spelt B-O-C-T-O-K in Russian Cyrillic. Now, as you can see, the fit of the tonneau case is sublime. 48mm really is the sweet spot, fits my 8-inch wrist to perfection. I love the curved profile of the tonneau case. It's also sometimes referred to as a barrel case, and it just is absolutely beautiful to look at. The blue sunburst style with those large 12, 9, 6 and 3 Arabic numerals are an absolute delight to look at. Of all the Vostok Amphibia, the 090 series is my personal favourite, and I consider this 090659 with a blue sunburst style to be the best looking piece they've ever made. Arrow hands are clearly legible, and as you can see, the sweeping red second hand contrasts with the large Arabic numerals and also that blue sunburst style. So clearly legible despite the fact that the domed lucite crystal doesn't have any AR coating and the sunburst style is highly reflective. Very comfortable piece to wear with outstanding feel-good factor. Really, for £60, the comfort and the feel-good factor cannot be beaten. So I'll talk you through the specification of the movement because it's also an interesting aspect of the piece. So this Amphibia uses the caliber 2415. The date complication version is referred to as the 2415B. So it has 31 joules. It has hand winding, but the negative is that it doesn't have hacking. When one unscrews the screw down crown, one cannot hack the movement to stop the second hand dead to set the time to the second precisely. So that is the trade-off of the movement. 40-hour power reserve is perfectly acceptable. A positive to the movement is Vostok recommend a 10-year service interval, which is a lengthy service interval. Usually with automatic movements, it's accepted that 5 years is the typical service interval. At the 5-year mark, usually an automatic movement will need to be broken down, the parts ultrasonically cleaned, and then the movement built back up with clean lubricants, and that therefore reduces the friction in the moving parts, and it also reduces wear and tear in the movement. So really, to get a 10-year service interval on a 31 joule movement is very impressive. Now, the negative of the movement is that it's not particularly accurate. I'm not going to quote the stated accuracy of the caliber 2415B because in practice it's far more accurate than Vostok state themselves. They think that the movement runs between plus or minus 30 seconds per day typically, but I found that Vostoks are typically regulated to better than that, and they will often run within plus or minus 20 seconds per day. Now I'm pleased to report that this one we're looking at here is running at plus 10 seconds per day, which I feel is perfectly acceptable, and certainly it's well within those factory limits of plus or minus 30 seconds per day. One really has to consider the durability. I would simply say that the caliber 2415B is indestructible. Although they say it has a 10-year service interval, it's nothing unusual for these movements to run for 20 or 30 years plus with no maintenance, no servicing whatsoever. They simply never fail. The only problem is that they don't have hacking, and the other problem is that they aren't the most accurate of movements. So let's do a loom test and we'll see how the loom performs when it's charged up to its absolute maximum. Now the original Amphibia from 1967 used tritium loom, which was very bright, but the problem was it was radioactive. So tritium was then succeeded by Luminova, which doesn't perform as well as tritium, but it is not radioactive, so it is safer to use on watch dials. Right, so that's now fully charged, and as you can see, initially the C3 Luminova does glow in a very aesthetically pleasing green tone. It does replicate the tritium which was used in the 1960s. The problem is that it fades, and it fades fast, so it does glow brightly initially on the arrow hands, but the dots on the indices do fade very fast, and I would say that overall the performance of the Luminova is poor. It's what one would expect on a £60 watch, which this is, so it's fair enough. But really it's a shame that Vostok don't improve on the quality of the C3 and upgrade it to Super Luminova, because that would really enhance the piece. So, lastly I'll surmise the watch. What do I think of it overall? Well, when I'm considering reviewing a watch on my channel, the watch should meet two criteria. The watch should be both excellent quality and excellent value at the respective price point. So the price point of this watch is low tier. It's only £60, and as I've discussed, one really has to separate the bracelet from the head of the piece and weigh up the watch separately. Yes, I consider it to be excellent quality with regards to the watch itself, the head of the piece. The bracelet is poor quality, and I would describe it as a throwaway bracelet which is best discarded. So one really needs to factor in the additional cost of a NATO strap, rubber strap, or alternatively a leather strap for the piece. So excellent quality head of the piece, excellent value head of the piece, but one really has to disregard the bracelet, which is rubbish. So I'm going to highly recommend it to you for your consideration. I think this watch is a champagne watch for lemonade money. It simply cannot be beaten for £60. When one buys a Vostok Amphibia, one is buying military pedigree behind the brand. They've been using this watch. The Soviet naval divers used it from 1967 through to the 1980s. It has all that history and pedigree behind it, that interesting provenance. So it's an incredibly interesting piece. The tonneau case is a classic 1960s vintage look. Now I like this watch so much, in fact, that I've decided to add it to my own personal collection, and that really is the highest compliment I can give the watch. So I hope you've enjoyed my review of the Vostok Amphibia 090659. Please feel free to post your own comments below the video. Thank you very much.